Tunisian government has made itself an enemy of Anonymous.
Within a matter of hours, Anonymous launched Operation Tunisia, paralyzing the president's site, several key ministries, and the stock exchange. The group also shared a cyber war survival guide, sharing cables from WikiLeaks documenting Ben Ali's corruption, tips on running from cops, and proxy sites to access Facebook and Twitter. The government quickly countered with a phishing operation, stealing Facebook and email passwords to spy on activists and obliterate online dissent. But tweets continued to spread, documenting a society's breakdown.
The internet is reportedly cut off from Sidi
People are creating barricades to protect their neighborhood.
Students demonstrating in Klubia, 50 miles
Injured young man shot by police in his back in Kafsa.
For a full week, I watched the story unfold online, speaking to activists, using Facebook and Twitter as protests turned bloody. And on January 12th, with Ben Ali's regime on the verge of collapse, Time magazine finally found the story. But the social networks had the best coverage. A new power structure had emerged, and protests had spread to other countries, and governments scrambled to buy time.
Algeria steps up grain imports.
Sheikh Abdallah of Jordan sacks government.
Plus free food for a year to keep calm.
But the anger had already rooted itself inside Arab minds. Through social networks, Egyptians had began drawing connections in late December.
Egyptians should copy Tunisia revolt.
Toppling their dictator. That will start a chain reaction in the Arab world.
Tunisia solidarity demo on Sunday.
Inspired by Tunisia's success, finally, the fear factor had broken. January 25th, a public holiday in Egypt, marking the day in 1952 that saw police back up the Egyptian people's resistance against British occupation. As people organized, they drew upon Tunisia's success, sharing pamphlets on peaceful protesting and self-defense. They made plans to circumvent police barricades, quickly capturing the world's attention. But Mubarak also learned from Tunisia. On January 27th, just as President Obama appeared live on YouTube answering questions from the public, Egypt's president took the unprecedented step of shutting down the internet. But he was too late. The World Wide Web was against him. The accounts of police abuse and violence circulated online, including footage that the Associated Press picked up showing what some have called Egypt's Neda moment. A coalition of volunteers, organizations, and activists set up platforms to get the message out.
Egyptians, email me if you want to post info on Twitter.
To break the block on Twitter, use this proxy.
Hotline numbers for legal aid and requesting lawyers. 010.
Even journalists in Egypt used their cell phones to send tweets to friends who relayed their messages.
Internet's still down in Egypt. We'll continue to tweet via
phone. Is safe. She just doesn't have internet access. So I'm tweeting on her behalf.
To stop any news getting out, the government went after the media. Journalists were detained, and the US government, which had been waffling in its response, turned to Twitter to make their voice heard.
We are concerned by the shutdown of AlJazeera in Egypt and the arrest of its correspondents. Egypt must be open and the reporters released.
30 minutes later, our journalists were released, showing that even governments can use social media to get things done.
Joining me to discuss the challenge of new media to governments and govern to the dictators, and the dictated is Carl Bernstein. You are a Pulitzer Prize-winning reporter who famously helped oust a president. Amy Goodman, best-selling author and the dame of multimedia's Democracy Now! Professor Emily Bell, Director of Digital Journalism here at Columbia University and formerly at the British Guardian newspaper. Clay Shirky, you're a professor, author, and guru of new media. And last but not least, Yevgeny Morozov, cyber skeptic and author of The Net Delusion, The Dark Side of Internet Freedom. Yevgeny, you're web skeptic, internet skeptic, social network skeptic. Have you changed your mind after these great events in Egypt?
I haven't. Revolutionaries will use whatever tools at their disposal to mobilize, and we've seen it through all previous revolutions. The Bolsheviks made great use of the postal service and the telegraph. The revolution in Iran in 1979 made great use of the tape recorders to smuggle in the sermons by the Ayatollahs, right, from Paris. So to me, yes, these tools will be used, and they have been, right? It doesn't mean that what happens between protests and what happens in periods of relative stability necessarily empowers people, and it doesn't necessarily mean that the internet overall is a force that favors the oppressed rather than the oppressors.
By the way, I just finished your book this morning, and you say in 293 that what those people tried, the social network in 2008, of course, was a big failure, and why should we expect anything else?
Well, because the conditions on the ground changed, right? There were plenty of revolutions in Russia which didn't work out in 1917, and before that, in February, but they worked out in October, right? So again, the political situation changes all the time. You saw a lot of protests in Egypt mobilized by Facebook in 2008. Why didn't they work out? Because again, the situation was different. The army was not probably yet with the protesters, and the geopolitical environment in the region was different.
And yet, Clay, is there an extra role for this weapons of mass mobilization called Twitter and YouTube?
One of the interesting things about the countries in the Maghreb, about Tunisia and Egypt, is there was systematic dismantling of the opposition, and yet you still had a world in which people could coordinate to turn out in the streets. You see Libya, you see Gaddafi's government shutting down football games, banning soccer in Libya for the same reasons they're concerned about Facebook or Twitter, which is they're concerned about the coordinating force. The real effect of these tools is going to be measured over years, not over days or weeks.
I have 2 points to make. On Twitter.com, if they end up selling for billions and billions and billions of dollars, they better put most of that into a people's fund in Egypt, because that's how their stock went up, and maybe they could abolish poverty in Egypt. That's number one. Number two, it is truly remarkable what young people did in Egypt, like Asma Mahfouz, the 26-year-old young woman who posted a videotape on her Facebook page that called on people on January 18th to go to Tahrir to stand with her on January 25th, National Police Day, protesting police brutality and how much had happened to the people, especially young people of Egypt. But we also have a lesson to learn in the United States. It was quite something to see President Obama making a very powerful statement about people's freedom of press, freedom of assembly, and freedom of access to the internet, that we should be guaranteed this. And I think we have to take this lesson to heart at home, because he is not following that path at home when we talk about issues of net neutrality, when we talk about something he promised before he became president, that he would keep the internet open and free. It's not the path he's going down, letting the internet, the video and telecom companies write the legislation that will privatize the internet. That is the greatest threat, I think, right now in the United States.
The thing was that two senators reintroduced the idea for internet kill switch bill on the same day that Mubarak cut the internet in Egypt. And it tells you about the disconnect between the domestic discussion about internet freedom and the aspirations for how it should be used abroad.
We want two rhetorics. We want an internationalist rhetoric and we want a nationalist rhetoric, and it is damaging